Do you have cushions on your patio furniture? If you do, you understand my problem. When we leave the cushions on the chairs, it's bound to rain on them or something, and then you can't really use them for a while. So I wanted a box to keep the cushions in. And you could go into the store and buy a plastic deck box that looks completely uninspired. And I decided I wanted something a little bit nicer. So I built this designer trunk. My inspiration was an old Louis Vuitton style trunk that might have been used by the fashionable in the Gilded Age. And I designed a custom logo and did all this with paint. I didn't use the cloth and leather like they would have. And I think it turned out pretty good. So if you'd like to have something a little nicer than those plastic deck boxes, stick around and watch how I build this. We live here in Central Virginia, and it's very hot and humid in the summers. Now, on the back of our house, we have sort of a courtyard. It's 3 sides are brick with a brick patio. And what that means is it gets really uncomfortable to try and sit out here in the really hot days of the summer. So that's why I'm building this new box, because it's going to be in a seating area down underneath of a tree where it, quite frankly, is a couple degrees cooler all the time. And I'm going to put a little brick patio out there and put this box to keep the cushions on. Now, a couple years ago, I built this deck box. It is kind of a shaker style, same Baltic birch construction, a hinged lid. The biggest difference down there is I needed it to be a little bit larger because the cushions are significantly bigger than these. And I kind of wanted something a little bit different down there. So that's why I went with this design. So this is my cut list. I drew up a very rough drawing of a box, not to scale, not perspective really good. All I was really looking for was to be able to identify each of the pieces I was going to need for the box, and then I can create my cut list. So these are the pieces that I need, and I'm going to get started on those next. And this project is made out of plywood, more specifically 12 millimeter marine grade Baltic birch plywood. So about a 1/2 inch thick, and it does come in a 4x8 sheet. So this box, being 48 inches wide, 24 inches deep, 16 inches high, will just fit 1 sheet of plywood. Now, the Baltic birch plywood is great to work with, consistent density, it's flat, it's a pleasure to work with, but it's very expensive. This sheet cost about $90 when I bought it, and I have to get it from a supplier that's about an hour and a half away. So if you include all my travel and everything else, you're putting well over $100 a sheet. So I've done a dry clamp up just to make sure it's all going to fit properly. I've found that I do need to trim my bottom a little bit. And then I wanted to make sure that the pillows fit correctly and that it basically how big it was going to look. So I'm going to get this taken apart and I'll get started laying out the joints. So now the joinery is pretty straightforward. The corners and the bottom I attached with dominoes. However, I think I would have been just as well off using a spline joint. And the spline joint is very simple. You cut a groove and you use a piece of spline, which I made out of 1/4 inch plywood. Again, this is the same Baltic birch marine grade product. And when you look at it, it's pretty much the same thing as a domino. I mean, you're dealing with just basically a loose tenon, except it's the whole way down. So that's a good strong joint, but the dominoes work really well. Now on the top of the lid, I didn't want to use that same joint for 2 reasons. One, I wanted to make sure I didn't have any seams on the very top because this is in the weather. And the second was I didn't want the end grain showing around the edges. I was going to put a round over on the top, and I just didn't feel like I wanted all that end grain showing. So the rabbet joint reduces the end grain. It gives me a nice strong joint with lots of glue surface. So that worked really good on the top. Now what you're looking at is exactly why we do a dry fit. You see, I'm struggling putting the two pieces together because I have dominoes going at 90 degrees to each other. And so it's very difficult to get that joint together. What I learned by doing this was that if I had put the two end pieces on first, then I could have put the front and back on, because you can see now, if I get those on, I have all my dominoes going in the same direction. I learned that that made it pretty simple to do, but I would not have wanted to face this with glue on everything and had to figure this out. Now with all that figured out, you can tell this is a pretty straightforward process to get it all glued up. Now we're going to go ahead and get these front and back pieces on. And I realized that I put the glue on the wrong side. So, no problem. Get it all glued up to the other side. And we'll get this wrapped up. Now to get some diagonal measurements here and make sure it's all square. So what I'm doing now is the back panel of the trunk has a little bit of a bow to it. So what I've done here is I've taken a piece of hardwood and I've made sort of a caul out of it. I've angled down this side and I've gone down on this side, which gives me a bow that I'll counteract the bow in the back of the board. And I'm just kind of trimming it now till I get it so that backboard is pretty flat. Hey, sorry to interrupt, but I hope you're enjoying the video, and if you are, please hit the like button and maybe consider subscribing to the channel. I would really like to hear from you, so let me know if you've got any ideas for other videos or just that you're enjoying these. Now back to the video. So what I'm doing here is this back piece is straightening out the back pretty well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this about 1/8 of an inch proud of the top of the trunk. Now the reason I'm doing that is I'm going to also add a smaller piece all the way around, remaining about 1/8 of an inch proud. That way when the trunk lid comes down on top of it, any water that may run in will hit that and not go into the trunk itself. Now it may take a little bit of trimming once on the lid itself once I get it set, but I think that's going to help keep the bottom waterproof and keep the pillows from getting wet. So what I've got is the side components of the lid to the trunk. So these are going to be assembled the same way as the trunk was, and with the domino joinery. Let's get this started. So the sides of the lid were joined the same way as the sides of the trunk with dominoes. I then cut the top out to fit exactly the outside dimensions, and then I dadoed a small rabbet in the sides so that this would sit down in here. I had to tweak it a little bit with the shoulder plane and got it pretty much fitting the way it should. So this will fit right into there like that. Now that's going to hold, it gives me a lot of glue surface, and that's going to hold the top square. So now I'll get this glued up, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to round the corners of everything. Here I'm marking out for a groove that will separate the leather edges from the logo field. Then another bit of sanding in order to prep it for the primer. So now I'm going to put a coat of an oil-based external primer on all surfaces of the box, both inside and out, and trying to make sure I get it down in those grooves. One of my biggest fears in the workshop is always spending days on a project and then ruining it in the finishing step. So what I like to do is create a sample. This project is a painting project. So I'm building it out of Baltic birch. So I took a piece of Baltic birch and I'm replicating exactly on this board the way I plan on doing the trunk itself. Same primer, same number of coats. This allowed me to take the three colors side by side, really get a good idea how they're going to look together. And also, this project had a stenciling technique, so I was able to make sure that the lighter paint was going to cover on the darker paint. I had an idea of doing a sponge technique on the inside. By doing it on the sample, I realized I didn't know what I was doing and I was going to ruin it if I had tried that. So it saved having to redo all of that work. And also, I could tell if I put a varnish over the paint, which I do sometimes for the luster, I realized that it really wasn't going to change it enough to really make a difference. So I decided to not do that. So all these things were allowed me to safely test my ideas without putting them to the project itself. This also goes for when you're doing a stained project. In those cases, you want to try to use the actual same board that you're using. So maybe a cutoff or something like that, that you can do the staining and the varnishing and the clear finish, whatever you're going to do to it on that cutoff, and make sure that it's going to work the way you expect it to. So this is the design of the print I want to use. It's got a little bumblebee that I created, and then a logo that is sort of a monogram of my wife and my initials. So now I'm going to give you a quick rundown of how I created the logo. Now I'm doing this in Adobe Illustrator, and you can see this is kind of what the logo looked like. So first, how I started out was I was using an italics of Times New Roman, and I created each letter individually. It was a little easier to work with. And I'm going to group all these together and convert them from a font to a curve. And now I'm going to create the outline and make the shading transparent. That way I can see what I'm working with. And I'm going to use this direct select tool here, and I'm going to take the one arm of the T and stretch it out, and do the same with the other arm. Gives me a little more room to create my
my logo with. And then I'm also going to stretch this one out. Now we're going to overlap the letters. Figure out exactly where I want to overlap them. Maybe tighten this up a little bit. Then I'll move the C over and place it. Then once I have this jumbled together, I'm going to select the whole lot of them, and I'll use the shape builder tool to combine these now. And then I'll get rid of some of the elements that I don't want. And then I can fill it all in, and we got it.
A little bit about how I'm putting the template down to create the pattern. What I've done is I created a fairly large template with a Cricut machine, and I've got the bees cut out on that. For the logo component, I just have a square or rectangle cut out where I want that logo to be. Then I created a rubber stamp with the logo so that I could now had a placement for the logo to go. Now, the reason I did it this way was when I first tried to put the template into put the logo into the template, the problem was because I've got a lot of little lines and points on the logo, it wanted to tear a lot. And with a lot to do, that was more than I wanted to take on. So I made this little rubber stamp with my X tool. Now, the alternate to all of this would be rubber stamps for all of them, the bee and the logo. Now, you can, if you don't have an X tool, there are places on the internet that you can get rubber stamps made for pretty cheap. Something like this probably would cost maybe $10 or $15. So you could do 2 stamps and then lay out where you want them. You wouldn't have to use a template at all. You could mark these out with masking tape or something else to identify where you want them. Now, the other tip I have is putting the paint on. I like to use these little makeup triangle foams. I like them because it's a real fine foam. They're easy to use, they're disposable. You can get like dozens for a couple bucks. They work really well. I use these a lot also when I just want to test something and I just want to see how the paint or the stain is, just put it on a piece of sample. They work good for that as well. But for this case, they are excellent in putting the paint through the template. Now also, with the rubber stamp. Now, if you were using ink, it's real easy to stamp on the ink pad and put it on. But with paint, it's too thick and it's too heavy. So what I do is I use this and I put the paint onto the template and then place it and set it down. And that has worked really, really well. I also like to use these little bathroom cups to dip the paint out of the can and then pour it onto a piece of aluminum foil or a plate or a palette of some sort and use that to stamp off. The nice part about using a little cup to dip the paint out, I'm not getting paint ripped down or dripping down all over the paint. It's a little easier to get it out in the state. So I just dip a little bit out, put it on there, and then I'm ready to go. I also use a wallpaper roller to make sure that the stencil is well applied. So that's my tips on how to apply the paint. Options a lot. You could do a whole template or stencil, You could do it by hand, obviously. If you don't have a Cricut, I'm sure there are people that would make it for you if you wanted to do it that way. I created both the bee and the little logo with Adobe Illustrator. Again, you could do that with pretty much any kind of graphics program. So that's what I've got on the template. Okay, so once we've put the design on, now I want to add what would be the leather trim around the box itself. So I'm faking that with some brown paint that is about the right color to be a leather trim. Now, a real good trick here is I'd put this small groove around where the trim would end. And what happens is by having that there and using a foam brush, I can come right up to it, and that's my nice crisp line. And I just have to be careful not to be too sloppy with it, and it works just fine.
So I'm going to paint the inside with the same color of green as the logo, and I'll roll that on with a foam roller.
So now that we've gotten the paint finished, we're going to start adding the hardware. We've got some of these traditional looking corner guards and bumpers and things like that. So we'll get those on now. Well, there we go. I've got the latch on. What I've done here is I have ground off the catch here, so this is no longer locked. It's just really basically a hasp. We'll put a carabiner on it to keep it closed. We put the corner brackets here to protect those, and then we added these handles on the ends. Now, while these wouldn't be the correct type handles on a high-end piece of luggage, I thought they looked nice and it serves the purpose. I think it'll hold up better to being outdoors. Now you can see we have some hinges here that I've added on. Now, all these hinges and the handle on the side were black, and I just hit them with a little bit of a kind of a goldish metallic paint to kind of blend them into the corner pieces.
So I wanted to add a little lip to the front and sides to prevent water from seeping back in. And I'm using an aluminum strip because it's thinner and it's not going to be in as much way as the back brace that I added. Now this chain was just temporary until the closing mechanism came in. I'm going to add this. This will provide it a little soft close as well as prevent the lid from opening too far. I'm going to add one on both sides.
So I knew I wanted to put this trunk on a base. I didn't want it sitting directly on the ground just so it doesn't hold the moisture and prematurely rot. So I wanted some kind of base, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what I wanted to do. Don't remember exactly what it was, but it's somewhere along the lines while I was building it, I thought, you know what? If you saw a trunk like this, it would have probably been at a railroad station or a dock getting ready to go on a ship. And what would have been on? A cart. So I got some old-fashioned casters like this, and we're going to build a simple base to set the trunk on it, and that's going to be our base. I think it's going to look just about right. So there we are. Trunk's all finished up, looking good, but unfortunately the patio's not. Weather has not been cooperative lately. It's either been extremely hot and humid or it's been raining, so I really haven't gotten a chance to finish up the patio. I'll give you a few shots of the trunk and kind of the area where it's going to go, but keep in mind the patio's not finished yet. We got it all ready to go. The pillows fit nicely, and I think it ended up pretty good. Thanks for stopping by.